Hello everyone! I hope you all had an excellent Easter weekend, and now we are going right back into the standard procedure with some white pills. No messing about, straight out the gate, let's get into the good news. So, This Egg, a theatre company based in the United Kingdom, sent out a series of tweets, and I'm going to go through them and drink up all the salty tears. The family sex show cancelled before it opened. Where do we go from here? Yes, the family sex show. Believe it or not, we are going to go through some of the reasons why people might not be fond of the family sex show being shown in a theatre near you. So the decision has been made by venues to cancel the tour of the family sex show this spring 2022. There will be performances for an invited audience at This Egg, Theatre Royal Bath, ahead of subsequent public performances in the future. These public performances would have offered safe and positive learning to children, young people and guardians about rights, bodies, sex and relationships, advised by safeguarding and educational specialists. Well, that may be true, but you clearly didn't have a good marketing team. Who calls their show the Family Sex Show and doesn't expect some sort of reaction? And by the way, whoever these safeguarding and educational specialists are, they need a good talking to as well, because some of the things in this show would make you question whether these people will pass a DBS check. For those not from Britain, a DBS check basically checks if you're on any particular lists to decide whether you are good for being in a safeguarding situation, especially with kids. So carrying on with the thread, audiences were given information about the content before booking so that they could come and make an informed decision to watch the show. It is regrettable that violent and illegal threats and abuse directed at the company and venues by a small group of people with extremist views prevented families from opting to attend something that was transparent, consensual and legal. So yes, violent threats directed at the company and the venues who were going to put on this show, yeah, they are obviously bad and illegal, as you say, so maybe some arrests should be made over them, but I don't know the details of them. This is something the police should be investigating, and, maybe they are. But no, it's not true that it was the threats made to the venue and the company that caused the play to be shut down. No, what it probably was instead was that a petition to scrap this play about sex aimed at children and their families has garnered more than 28,000 signatures a few weeks before the show was set to open at a Bristol theatre. So, one, this isn't as much of a minority as you're making it out to be, and two, you can't say everyone who signed that petition has an extremist view. That's just ridiculous. We believe what has happened is reflective of structural and societal attitudes towards relationships and sex education, as well as art, culture, and who is allowed to create and what we are allowed to engage with in the UK. Interesting. Yes, I do think it's reflective that people generally don't want 5-year-olds seeing things about sex. I think, yes, generally people do want to keep children innocent. The creative team will spend the next 2 weeks finishing the show, ready for a time it might be able to meet a public. We also want to respond to the events of the last few weeks and how we move forward. Removing work that celebrates freedom of expression from stages cannot be the answer. As you will find out later, as you probably have already guessed by now anyway, this show was made by a bunch of leftists. So screaming free speech, though, is something I'm going to completely ignore, though I will go into the nuances of free speech a bit later. For audiences who booked or wanted to come to the show, we are sorry. We hope you will be able to soon. For venues who might want to programme the show, we hope you will. In the meantime, anyone who wants to explore some of the themes of the show for themselves, we've made some pages on our website to support that here, and we will follow that link in just a bit. But I suppose since it's been mentioned, I should go through the nuances of freedom of speech. Now, do I like the tactic of writing up petitions, writing to venues, writing to production companies and saying this show should be cancelled? No, I don't generally like that. In this case, though, I will take a bit of an exception. As of just a week ago, this was a show that had sexual themes, that was being advertised as a family show, and was inviting people as young as 5 years old to come and watch the show. However, given the themes of the show and given what we're going to go through later, I think it's absolutely reasonable for people to write to venues saying, look, this is clearly a problem, this is going to ruin children's innocence. And obviously they've knee-jerked and cancelled the show. And honestly, with how close we are to the production being made, I think that was actually the best thing that the private theatres could do. Because really, I think anything with any sort of theme should be made available to be watched by people over the age of 18. If you're over 18, you should be able to watch shows with sexuality as the theme, whether it's educational or entertaining. And that does include this quote-unquote family sex show. But the problem is, obviously, is that it's being shown to kids under 18. And with material they say is going to be in the show, yeah, I can see why this should be, well, taken down for now. Maybe in the future have the caveat, yeah, you can show this show to people, just no one under 18 is allowed in the theatre when you show it. This is clearly adult material. And the difference between that and between what leftists tend to try and cancel, the most recent example being Ethan Klein of the H3H3 Productions, they will go directly after the money of these people and try and ruin their entire lives. In terms of Ethan Klein, he told a quote-unquote homophobic joke, and now he's lost all his sponsors. What people are doing with this egg company is saying this particular show you have made should not be shown to people under 5, given how close we are to the show being open to the public. We have decided to just close the show down entirely. Maybe again in the future, if you want to show it again, we will allow you to, with the caveat that only over 18s can come there, etc, etc. We're not ruining these people's lives. We're not trying to get the whole company shut down. We're saying this particular show we don't like being shown to people under 18. Please stop it. And they did. Whereas when leftists do it, with Ethan Klein, they are just trying to completely ruin his life. I'm sorry I had to go into so much explanation of that, but if I didn't go into that level of depth, people would just say that I'm coping. Anyway, I think it's time we get into detail on what the family sex show actually is. And I'm just going to give you a full screenshot of their website, because, I mean, I've had to edit part of this as well, because there are tits in it, and I don't want YouTube to ban me. But it's all this crap on the side, you know, it's just talking about sex. I have so many questions, and you know, there's a sticker on the left here saying, I like earlobes. It's just really, really weird stuff, and honestly, I think something like this is just going to confuse 5-year-olds more than it's going to help them. So anyway, let's read what they have to say. The Family Sex Show, a fun and silly performance about the painfully awkward subject of sex, exploring names and functions, boundaries, consent, pleasure, queerness, sex, gender and relationships, using real bodies, personal stories, songs and movement. The Family Sex Show puts the good stuff at the forefront of conversation and imagines a future where there is no shame but a celebration of difference, equality and liberation. They are trying to overcome Eve eating the forbidden fruit. The fact that humans have knowledge and have a feeling of shame about this sort of thing is a good thing. It's how our societies are built and it's how they're successful. It's the one thing alone that stops a lot of people from cheating on their partners and absolutely ruining their relationships and their families. So I think teaching kids to undermine that, yeah, I don't think that's a particularly good thing. This egg invites you to bring your parents, bring your children, friends, lovers, and bring your whole self. Made in consultation with the School of Sexuality Education, this is a show for everyone. If they've been involved in this, genuinely I think they should be looked into. So next they give us a picture of the cast and crew. I'm not going to say an awful lot about this, apart from this is pretty much what I expected them to look like. Take from that what you will. And a bit further down you finally get a little bit of information on the show. So it's a 1-hour show, and apparently the age suitability is everyone. They suggest 5 and above. And then straight away it says, this show contains nakedness. There's going to be nudity, full adult nudity in this show. And apparently the theatre said, yep, that is 5+, that sounds good enough for us. Until people pointed out it's a bit paedophilic. If knowing exactly what happens in the show might make you more comfortable, we will have a pre-show document available 28th of April 2022. And that was while they were planning on actually having the show ready. But now it's been cancelled, God knows if that's coming out. But anyway, next up on the website there's a bit of a showcase of behind the scenes pictures, and honestly, some pictures are just like your average, these are drama students, they're being a bit weird in pre-show rehearsal type pictures. Just doing little dances and looking pretty happy, but then we've got some really weird ones. So I guess I'll go with the least worst first. This is the least worst, and it looks a bit dodgy. You've got one person in a wheelchair, with another woman just standing either side of it, almost straddling her, with the ginger guy behind just kind of pushing it. You know, this is the least worst, but it still looks a bit weird for me, and it might not even necessarily be anything sexual with it, but it just looks a bit weird to me. As I say, it's the least worst. Next we've got this lovely picture of the gang being a bit weird. The back, I mean, again, on the left at the back, looks like he's about to straddle the person in the wheelchair. On the right hand side, they're not doing anything particularly bad, just having a good time. But in the middle, it looks like you got a bit of dry humping, which is really weird. And they all, well, those two, especially in the middle, look like they're putting on orgasm faces. This stuff is okay for 5-year-olds, according to them. And then finally, what I think is probably the worst one. You've got something that looks like it should be straight out of an 18-rated show, with a man and a woman half naked, I'll give them that, but it doesn't look that out of place for a sex scene in a show. Looking into each other's eyes, generally looking like they've got some sort of romantic connection there, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's then implied that they are going to then go off to consummate a marriage or something. In this show, God knows what that was going to be. And given we're going to have full nakedness, as they put it, I don't know why they didn't say full nudity, but given that they're saying they're going to have full nakedness, God knows what else is going to go on in this show. And I do find it pretty dodgy that even a couple of weeks before the show is going to be put out there, they don't have a full itinerary of what exactly is going to go on. They just say, yeah, there'll be a bit of nudity in there. Like, how do you know you're going to have full nudity in your show before you've actually got the full plan out there? I don't understand. So at the end of the main page, I guess I'll give a quick overview on each of these. First, it's the FAQ. I'm going to go through some of them, so don't worry. Next up, we have the podcast, and they do make it clear that the podcast does have sexual themes, but they do say it is for 16 plus only. So really, I have no real problem with that, because at 16 plus, you're allowed, and you should be able to listen to chats of a sexual nature, which is essentially all the podcast is. I think they're wrong on most things, but it's not up to me to tell 16-year-olds not to listen to that because they're wrong. And finally, we have the glossary. Again, I'm going to go through the glossary and give some of my takes on some things they have in there, because it's very strange. But first things first, some highlights from the FAQ section. Why are you making this show? We are making the show is a response to relationships and sex education in the UK, in hope that we can create an alternative, offline, honest and human theatre show that is offering an intersectional, feminist, non-binary, anti-racist and sex-positive take on relationships and sex education. Basically, not only are they going to show kids exactly what a penis does and what happens when it goes into a vagina, they're also going to tell kids that doing so might be racist. And they do have an awful lot of things about how to be an LGBT ally. These people literally are just the worst type of progressive. Open conversations across multi-generational audiences. Give space to ask the questions no one feels brave enough to ask. Give audiences agency to find out more. We don't have all of the answers, and even if we did, we wouldn't give them to you. That's a really, really weird thing to say. And finally, use pleasure as a vehicle for consent. Knowing that we get to decide what feels good for us as individuals, and that our boundaries are ours to decide. So some of those are really self-explanatory, but that last one I just can't get my head over. Use pleasure as a vehicle for consent. I have no idea what they mean by that, and then their explanation of knowing that we get to decide what feels good for us as individuals, and that our boundaries are ours to decide. What are they on about? What's that got to do with using pleasure as a vehicle for consent? It just doesn't make any sense. This is the problem I have with intersectionality and everything academic that they write. It never makes any sense. Which is part of the danger of this. If you read intersectional academic papers, as Douglas Murray in his book The Madness of Crowds goes through, they just obfuscate everything. They can't get to a point well at all. They have to constantly talk around it in really flowery language. And it basically gives off the vibe that they know what they're talking about and what they're saying is clever, when really it's just a load of crap. And that final bullet point proves it perfectly. Next up, why is it called The Family Sex Show? We hope that the title informs audiences that the show is about sex, and that is for family audiences, people of all ages. Oh, shoot me now. We hope that people will read more about the show before deciding whether it is right for them, but if they don't read more about the show, we hope the title gives off a similar upfront and honest tone the show takes. We also want to be clear about the content of the show through the title, and felt that something more like The Birds and the Bees might be seen as false advertising. I suppose I can give them that. At least they're not trying to hide the fact that they're trying to indoctrinate kids and ruin their innocence. They are upfront about it. We are going to teach them about intersectionality, and we're also going to tell them what the penis and vagina does at the age of 5. Next highlight, why is it for families and not for schools? It's about opening conversations across generations. We want people to come with someone they trust to have those conversations with. There are a few difficulties with making the family sex show a school performance, aside from making it in a completely different way, and probably following a government syllabus of some kind, and so not giving anything new to what is already being taught in most schools. Part of the reason is that a lot of the time schools and their teachers don't feel quite equipped to teach this topic. If a young person, so why are you working with education boards? If a young person came to see the show with their school and didn't fully understand something or wanted to know more about something, they might not have anyone to ask or talk to. We don't want to have control over how anyone responds after the show, although we have been careful in the way we have made it, and will have materials ready for the audience afterwards, as well as live workshops in the foyer as you leave. If a parent, guardian, or someone who cares for the well-being of the child has chosen to take them, oh my god, that's really... Someone who cares for the well-being of a child. Yeah, someone who took them in a van saying free candy on the outside, I suppose. We can more safely assume they feel ready to hold those conversations that might come up. What I find very strange about this, actually, is that, especially in Canada and the US, it appears that teachers are basically going around their parents to teach kids things and say, hey, you can transition in a school, just don't tell your parents, yeah? Whereas when it comes to this family sex show, they're just going, hey parents, this is exactly what we're going to teach your kids, and we think schools should teach it this way because we don't think they do a good enough job. Which makes it even stranger with the next question. Why so young? 5 is young. Sexual development and behaviour in children starts from birth, which is a really weird way to put it, but I mean, I'll go through what they cite in a minute. It's important that children are supported in their exploratory development, safely and comfortably. You can see the common stages of sexual development laid out by the NSPCC here, which for those who don't know, that's the National Society for Preventing the Cruelty to Children. Someone who should probably be looking into this show and saying, oh my god, I can't believe we helped them make this, but here we are. Because what the NSPCC cite for 5 to 9-year-olds is completely different to what is being implied by the family sex show. So, as children get a little older, it's common to see them displaying behaviour like becoming more modest and asking for privacy, asking questions about sex and relationships, such as what sex is, where babies come from, and same-sex relationships. To which the answer from most parents isn't what this show is going for. They are not going to tell them exactly what a penis and ejaculation is. In fact, most of the time they'll probably do that made-up story with the storks coming in, delivering babies. Consensually exploring relationships with peers, for example mimicking adult relationships by holding hands with a boyfriend or girlfriend, or giving them a kiss on the cheek. Things that are unbelievably innocent. Because that's what we should try and do with kids, maintain their innocence. This show is going to do the opposite. And yes, I get that they are not forcing people to watch it, but for the same reason we age restrict films and, thank God as well, porn, this show should also be age restricted. No one left it up to the parents as to whether they should let their 5-year-old watch 50 Shades of Grey. Speaking of saying this is all okay for 5-year-olds, next question, will people get naked? There is nakedness, yes. At one point in the show, everyone on stage takes their clothes off to the level they feel comfortable to. For some people, that's taking off all their clothes and being completely naked. This show is okay for 5-year-olds. For other people, that means taking off bottoms but leaving underwear on. For others, it's not taking anything off at all. This moment lasts approximately 5 minutes. For more information on exactly what happens in the show, see our pre-show document here, and that just links to an empty page because they've still not finished the document. We know 5 minutes is dedicated to getting people naked on stage, but we don't know what's going on the rest of the show. Yeah, that's very dodgy. Luckily, there's a bit more context. Why do you get naked? We want to have an honest, shame-busting and upfront conversation about bodies. For a lot of us, what we see of bodies is on a screen. There are many choices that have been made for us when it's on a screen. For example, the type of body we are shown and how we are shown the body. Often bodies are sexualised, objectified and photoshopped, creating unhealthy body-shaming expectations within society. And of course, they're doing the exact same thing on a stage instead. It's the exact same thing. This is editorialised. We think it's important to begin to challenge this. We hope that by seeing real-life bodies on stage, just as they are in a non-sexual context, we begin to realise that they are just bodies. Everyone has one, everyone's is different, and there is nothing wrong with them, just as they are. That said, it is always important that when you do get naked yourself, you are somewhere safe and in private. Yes, I'm sure a 5-year-old is going to take that lesson away, when they see on stage a load of grown adults getting their wangs and tits out. Just not a good look exactly, is it? Anyway, on to the next question. Will people have sex on stage? No, no one will have sex on stage. However, the picture from the backstage photographs tend to show that while they may not be having sex, there will at least be some dry humping. Anyway, the final question I will go through is copium overload. Where does safeguarding sit in and around the show? An interesting question in our society. Talking about sex isn't normalised, and if a child does openly talk about sex, we are trained in safeguarding that this might be a red flag. We are trying to change that. One of the aims of the Family Sex Show is to promote safeguarding. It has been made with the understanding that informing young people about their rights and bodies is a key aspect in sexual violence prevention. Knowledge of sex and sexuality won't on its own trigger a safeguarding concern. Observations we as adults make do not on their own constitute a concern. It's best practice to ask open follow-up questions for more information. For example, we may observe a bruise on a child's arm or notice that their clothes are dirty, and because of this, we may feel a concern about their health and safety. But by asking follow-up questions, we might find that there is a reasonable explanation, i.e. they fell off while they were climbing, or the washing machine was broken. Therefore, these answers may not require further action. Yes, I understand that we shouldn't jump to conclusions. That's fine. However, I don't think we can say the same thing about sex and a bruise on the knee. So this is similar to a young person telling us, I love how they say young person when they mean child, a 5-year-old child. But this is similar to a 5-year-old child telling us, I know what vulvas are, or I know about sex now. These statements might warrant open follow-up questions. A response from the child such as, I saw the Family Sex Show at the theatre, would be a reasonable response, and they were not in fact at risk. That was true at the time of writing this. As of now, we are apparently not so sure. And they link to the NSPCC website again, which is fine, but yes, this is pure copium, this entire paragraph. It's basically them trying to cover themselves for when the inevitable accusations of noncery come out and about. Hence, I'm going through it and pointing out to you that, yes, they do want to say that it's not a red flag if a 5-year-old comes up to you and says that they found out about sex from them. It's very strange behaviour, I have to say that. So after all that strange behaviour, as I noted before, in the large thread on Twitter by This Egg, they had a link to this page called The Zine. And they say here, we've created this page to hold some of the content we'd like to add to the Zine at some point in the future. This page was originally made for people who have been to see the Family Sex Show. Since that's not possible right now, it is here for anyone who might find this stuff useful, either to read and watch more about some of the themes, or just support you to do some of your own thinking. We can explore these themes and activities on your own or with other people, so naturally we're going to go through some of them. So first things first, body and touch. Some of the Family Sex Show was about touching and the kinds of touch different people like. We're going to do some thinking out loud as well as some arts and crafts to learn more about touch and bodies. So an example question and answer was, what are the sorts of things that you touch that make you feel nice? And the examples are fluffy sippers and hugging our best friends, which seems very warm and innocent and something you might ask a 5-year-old and might be a good answer from them. But then things escalate really quickly, and the page says, in the show we mention masturbation. All kinds of animals masturbate, not just humans. Use the internet to find some examples of other animals that masturbate. Yes, they're asking 5-year-olds to go onto Google and type in animal masturbate. Believe it or not, I don't think that's a particularly good idea. I mean, for God's sake, I know a school that had to make their kids Google Queen Victoria's husband because he was called Prince Albert. And obviously images that come up on Google of a Prince Albert are not something that 7-year-olds should see. And then they say, why don't you draw animals you found? Alright, drawing animals, that's fair enough. However, if you're going to draw them pumping it away, yeah, I don't think that's a good idea. And then they go on to say, the vulva is what is commonly and mistakenly called the vagina. The vagina is only the tunnel inside the body. Wait, I love how they call it a tunnel. Where you might insert a tampon. Okay, true. The vulva is the outside part of some people's genitals. I love it, some people's genitals. Women's genitals. They are women. Remember, not all women have vulvas, and not all vulvas belong to women. I mean, this is why they get called groomers. This is grooming. This is literally manipulating a child into basically saying that, a woman is not an adult human female. That's all this is doing. And then they say, why don't you try drawing and labelling your own vulva? How about fucking no? And you may have noticed that there was a link in between those paragraphs saying, if you'd like to try and make your own Play-Doh and Play-Doh genitals, have a go at these instructions from Dr. Emma Chan's blog. And this is the paragraph of the blog post. The information here is adapted from an exercise from Sexplain UK, used as part of their sexual and relation lessons. In short, it involves using Play-Doh to build genitals. This exercise can be used to teach people about external genitalia. As an arts and crafts activity, it can be fun and engaging and help to give something concrete to talk about in terms of things like physiology, variation and health. It's also included a recipe I use for homemade Play-Doh. Now, I'm not going to go through any more of this article because it's got pictures of Play-Doh vaginas and penises, and I don't think YouTube would let me get away with that. But again, why are you saying to 5-year-olds, make your own penises and vulvas and then talk to people about it? It's very, very strange. So the next one I'm going to go through is, what is sexuality? And this page is pretty self-explanatory. This page will help you explore thoughts around sexuality. So again, I think it starts pretty innocently, saying sexuality is about who you might fancy and not fancy. You could fancy people of a different gender, same gender, people who don't identify with a gender, or fancy nobody at all. Goes on a bit about pronouns, which I'm just skipping because it's pretty similar to this one, and then says sexuality is fluid, which means that you can change throughout a person's life. So it's totally normal if you find yourself fancying someone that you didn't expect to fancy. And that's kind of true, but the way they're pushing this is they're basically saying like, oh, you could be straight, but then you fancy a man and want to shag him. Which doesn't tend to be what happens with sexual fluidity. It tends to be more what your type is. I'm sure there's all been women in our lives that we've thought, yeah, they're alright, but not really my type, and then go 5 years down the line and you're like, wow, they actually really are hot. It's closer to that than to, oh, all of a sudden you like boys, which is what this is implying. But then it gets to the questions, and again, this is a bit groomy-like. This isn't saying, oh, here's us helping you explore your sexuality. It's more them saying structures and society is pushing the gaze down. Do you think that people of all sexualities are treated fairly in your society? Can you think of reasons why unequal treatment exists? You may want to have a read through of this article, and they don't link anything because they can't make a website, to help you understand some of the history around gay rights. Can you think of any TV shows that show a range of people of different sexualities? If not, can you do some research to find TV shows for your age group that do? Yes, they want 5-year-olds to try and Google who gay characters are in their Peppa Pig show. Again, the more I read into this, the more I think, yes, it's very right that this show didn't go on. It seems to be one of the worst things you can show a 5-year-old that's aimed at them. Because I think it's fine to tell kids that you shouldn't just hate people because they're gay or trans or whatever. But that's not what this family sex show is doing. What this family sex show is doing is giving them their own moral framework, which most of the country don't agree with, if they were being honest about it, and then saying, this is how you've got to think, oh, by the way, you've also got to be an ally. In other words, they have put a front of this saying, oh, this is just a stage show teaching kids about sexuality and sexualities they might be seeing in their life, which on its own is bad enough, but then there's another layer to it when really it's just them trying to sell them their politics without overtly letting them know that this is basically just political propaganda. Luckily, they give the game away with the last one, which is centering joy. We're going to use this page to think about how to prioritise joy in our lives. And at first, this section just says, oh, listen to songs you like and do things that make you happy. It will make you feel better as a person. But literally, after spending 2 paragraphs saying that, they get onto this. The family sex show delves into a variety of interconnected social justice themes, including inclusivity and intersectionality. Jot down some more themes from the show that resonated with you. Activism is about creating change within our communities. Activists may be campaigning, protesting, teaching and caring for those who receive unequal treatment within society. Activism is also about the way we prioritise joy in our lives. Investing time in increasing our own pleasures and joy are ways in which we resist oppressive systems as individuals and as collective. It takes work because we are taught by society to value capital and productivity while sacrificing joy. This is about planting a pleasure seed and growing it ourselves. So I don't know how they managed it, but in 3 paragraphs they've basically turned it around from saying, oh, you know that music you like and those drawings you like making? Yeah, what's actually stopping you from being happy all the time is capitalism. And I don't even know how they did that. And now that I think about it, it's not even just that. It's not just saying capitalism bad. It's also saying being an activist against capitalism will make you happy. This is pure manipulation on political grounds. This is pure propaganda for left-wing socialist causes. No wonder this was going to be put up in Bristol. So at the bottom of this page, they have this paragraph. In their book, Pleasure Activism, The Politics of Feeling Good, Adrienne Marie Brown, so one is a woman, they probably have she, her pronouns. I can't believe I even said that. So I don't know why they've one misgendered her, and I too don't know why they didn't capitalise her names, but these people can't make a good website. Anyway, she sets out some of their intentions for the reader, and they include recognising that pleasure is a measure of freedom. Noticing what makes you feel good, learning ways to increase the amount of feeling good time in your life, and collectively orientating around pleasures as a community. And they have a video as well, and I think it would be a good idea to quickly go through some of this video because it's awful.
There's an us before the wound, there's an us before oppression. And to me, pleasure is a way that we tap down into that. I'm like, when I'm having an orgasm, I'm not like, slavery, you know, I'm like, you might be my slave, but, you know, like in a good way.
So right off the bat, when the family sex show is told 5-year-olds that they will find pleasure in activism, the first thing they are shown in the video accompanying them saying that is basically promoting a submissive dominatrix type relationship, and it, for some reason, is also telling them that they should always think about oppression or political issues from 200 years ago. It's just a very strange opening.
It's really about like, oh, I feel very free. To me, the work was about like, how do we remind people that you were free to begin with? You were always free to begin with.
And this is another thing that the article mentions. They say the more pleasure you have, the more free you are, which is all that's going to do is lead kids down the road of hedonism. I mean, 120 days in Sodom, those Italian men, I suppose, were very free in pursuing their pleasures, but I don't know about all the girls that they kidnapped.
For me, I was like, how can I bring like the best feeling when it's like the best high or the best mushroom, or you know when you're on, have you maybe done mushrooms? All right, everybody else, just get to it. All right, life is short.
Again, aged 5 and up, what we have been promoted with so far is go into a sexual fetish, and that means you are more free, and also do mushrooms. Yeah, I don't think you should be telling 5-year-olds to do either of those things.
We have been raised to fear the yes within ourselves, our deepest cravings. But once recognized, those which do not enhance our future lose their power and can be altered. The fear of our desires keeps them suspect and indiscriminately powerful. For to suppress any truth is to give it strength beyond endurance.
Man, I'm not being funny, but as a 26-year-old, that doesn't make an awful lot of sense to me. But trying to put in other words what she just said there, it sounds like she's saying that our deepest desires shouldn't actually be taboo, and in making them taboo, they actually become stronger. And if they are actually desires that won't, as she says, enhance our future, won't help our future, won't help us to become better people, we can change those desires anyway and turn them into something positive. Yeah, that's just not true. And I actually think that's quite a dangerous outlook on life. I mean, that will, one, just turn you into a hedonist. You can't just change your deepest desires. If you could, we wouldn't have any nonces. And teaching kids that things they desire should never be taboo is a ridiculous thing, especially for a 5-year-old, because, man, they can be pretty violent.
I started asking myself, like, how did I unlearn pleasure? Or when did I unlearn pleasure? When I look back, it's like, oh, there's an ancestral unlearning of pleasure, a way that Black women on this country have been trained to be in service with our bodies, rather to be in pleasure in our bodies. I realize that we're not the only ones, that almost every human on Earth in some way has been disconnected from their natural relationship to the planet, from their natural relationship to themselves, from our natural relationships to each other. And that pleasure is one of the ways we know, like, oh God, I'm in nature. Oh God, I'm with my lover. Oh God, I'm connected. I'm part of something. I belong. I'm safe. Pleasure lets us know all that, right?
She just sounds like she's on mushrooms talking about this right now. I'm not being funny, but the state of nature with man, when they were just having sex, it will have just been, oh, we can only use our bodies. They didn't have sex toys. They didn't have... I mean, you can fill in the blanks with anything you can think of there. They especially didn't have dragon dildos, though. And these things are used to try and get people to a higher state of pleasure. So this is just Rousseauian nonsense. This is basically saying, oh, we feel a lot better when we're closer to nature more than when we're more primitive. You know, we need to get away from modern sensibilities and things like that because these created the taboos. And I don't think that's necessarily true. The medieval peasant would have been a lot closer to the primitive man than we are now, and yet they had a load more taboos than we do. So as I say, it's just Rousseauian society makes people terrible nonsense. We shouldn't be indoctrinating anyone with this stuff, but it's for 5-year-olds. Anyway, I'm not going to go into any more of that video, because I think you get the idea. The family sex show is not a good thing. I was going to have this last section go through some of the glossary, but honestly, I don't think it's that interesting given everything we've gone through. And I think you can guess that they have explanations of what dildos are, of what ejaculation is, although they even call it cum. And then they've got a load of social justice terms in there. They've even got anti-capitalism in there. I don't know what any of this had to do with capitalism, but it turns out that the family sex show is just a massive leftist indoctrination camp designed to make them look like nonces. I mean, with this whole trend going on, especially in America, of calling teachers who try to teach all this stuff to kids groomers, I'm really, really sympathetic to it, especially after reading through this. But I don't think it's right to just say this person is left-wing and teaching kids, and they have a pride flag in their classroom, therefore they must be a groomer. I think we need to be a bit more nuanced than that. But I would definitely get all flags out of the classrooms, apart from, of course, the American flag in America. In the UK, it doesn't look like we're quite at that stage of the problem yet, but obviously, I agree it should be the same in the UK as well. Only Union Jacks and flags of England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, if you're going to have any flag in the classroom that is supposed to denote what we believe. And, you know, I'm not saying never have any other nation's flag in the classroom, but if one's going to be stuck there permanently, it should absolutely be the flag of your country. But anyway, I think that's off topic at this point, and I think it's just time to conclude. Basically, it's a good thing that this show got cancelled recently. It will be fine coming back, just don't advertise it for anyone under the age of 18, or it may be a push 16. Clearly within the clan decade we are having a growing trend of trying to teach younger and younger kids about things that are going to destroy their innocence, and I think it's a moral duty to stop that and try and maintain a child's innocence. And it looks like just under 30,000 people who actually saw this petition agreed that yes, we do need to keep child's innocence sacred. Because it really does seem like some political actors are really trying to come for your kids. And this family sex show tried to do it in a nice way, by simply advertising this political propaganda as something innocent and designed for kids. So be very careful about what your kids are seeing, and if you're going to go to a theatre, yes, you absolutely should check what you are actually watching first. But anyway, that's everything I had for you today. So as usual, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.